The July sun hung heavy over Worthington, Ohio, casting long shadows across my parents' backyard, a patchwork of crabgrass and dandelions that screamed suburban heartland. The Carter family reunion was in full swing, a chaotic symphony of 30 relatives crammed into a quarter-acre lot. Classic rock, Springsteen, naturally, blared from a Bluetooth speaker perched on a wobbly folding table, competing with the sizzle of burgers on the grill and the shrieks of kids dodging a sprinkler spray. The air smelled of charcoal, sunscreen, and that faint sweetness of summer you can't bottle. My son, Ethan, 6 years old with a mop of brown curls and a grin that could charm a grizzly, darted through the crowd, his sneakers kicking up dust clouds. He clutched a new Spider-Man action figure, waving it at his cousins with the kind of pride that makes your chest ache. I sat at a picnic table, a half-eaten hot dog slathered in mustard balanced in one hand, a cold root beer sweating in the other. My wife, Lauren, was in Chicago for a marketing conference, leaving me to wrangle Ethan solo. I didn't mind. These reunions were messy, sure, but they were home, loud, flawed, familiar. I watched Ethan weave between aunts and uncles, his laughter cutting through the chatter. My sister, Tara, 28 and wired like a live spark, leaned against the old Dodge minivan parked at the edge of the driveway. Her auburn hair was yanked into a messy bun, and her smirk spelled trouble. She'd been at Ethan all day, stealing his Reds cap, tickling him until he squealed, the usual aunt-nephew dance. But today, her eyes had a glint, sharper than usual, like she was chasing something bigger than a laugh. "Hey, Ethan," Tara called, waving him over with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Wanna see something cool?" He sprinted to her, trusting as always, his small hand reaching for the car door handle as she gestured toward it. I was about to take another bite, ketchup dripping onto my plate, when it happened. Tara slammed the door shut, hard, the metal thud echoing like a gunshot. Ethan's scream tore through the yard, high and raw, as his fingers caught in the frame. The music seemed to fade, the laughter stopped, and every head turned. Cousins froze mid-game, Uncle Ray dropped his spatula, Aunt Linda gasped into her lemonade. My heart lurched, the hot dog hitting the ground as I bolted toward him. But before I reached Ethan, my dad's voice boomed from the porch, where he sat in his faded lawn chair, a Bud Light in hand, his graying beard framing a smirk. "That's what happens to the useless," he barked, followed by a gravelly chuckle that hit me like a slap. Tara's smirk faltered, her eyes darting to Ethan, then away, but she didn't move, didn't apologize. She just stood there, arms crossed, like it was all a game gone slightly off script. I scooped Ethan up, his small body trembling, tears streaming down his freckled cheeks. His fingers were red, swelling fast, and he clung to me, his sobs muffled against my shoulder. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, though my voice shook. I carried him into the house, past relatives who muttered awkward sympathies, "Oh, he'll be fine, kids are tough," and into the kitchen. The linoleum was cool under my feet as I grabbed a bag of frozen peas from the freezer, pressing it to Ethan's hand. He winced, his eyes wide and searching, asking a question I couldn't answer, "Why?" I sat there, icing his hand, my own shaking as the moment replayed, Ethan's scream, Tara's nonchalance, Dad's cruel words. I'd grown up with their rough edges, their jokes that always stung a little too much. Tara's pranks were legend, putting hot sauce in my milk when I was 10, locking me in the shed for an hour at 12, but I'd always laughed it off, or tried to. Dad's barbs were worse, his useless jabs a constant hum in my childhood. But this was different. This was my son, my heart outside my body, and the family I'd always defended had just shown its ugliest side. As Ethan's sobs quieted, I knew I couldn't let it go. Not this time. Back at our Columbus apartment, the clock ticked past midnight. Ethan slept fitfully in his Spider-Man-themed bedroom, his bandaged hand cradled against his chest, the action figure tucked under his pillow. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of my phone casting shadows on the chipped formica. Lauren's name lit up the screen as I texted her. Something happened at the reunion. "Ethan's okay, but we need to talk." She called within seconds, her voice tight with worry, and I spilled it all, the prank, Dad's laugh, the way it felt like a betrayal. "Matt," she said, her tone steady but firm, "you need to confront them. For Ethan's sake. He can't grow up thinking that's normal." She was right, but the thought of facing Tara and Dad churned my stomach. I'd spent 34 years swallowing their barbs, laughing off Dad's useless jabs like they were just his way of toughening us up. Growing up, Tara and I were his favorite targets, me for spilling milk at dinner, her for sneaking out to meet friends. I'd learned to shrug it off, to be the good son who got straight A's, landed a steady accounting job, married Lauren, started a family. But hearing those words aimed at Ethan, my bright, curious boy who loved drawing comics and cheering for the Reds, was like a knife twisting in my gut. I thought back to a memory from when I was 12, mowing the lawn under Dad's watchful eye. I'd missed a patch near the fence, and he'd scoffed, "Can't even mow right. Useless." The word burned, but I'd laughed it off, desperate to please him. Another time, at 15, I fumbled a pass during football tryouts, and he'd yelled from the stands, "Useless," in front of my teammates. I'd burned with shame but pushed through, thinking that's what strength meant. Now, seeing Ethan's quiet pain, I realized how deep those splinters went. The next morning, I took Ethan to the pediatrician. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic, and Ethan sat silently, clutching his Spider-Man figure. The doctor, a kind woman with gray streaks in her hair, confirmed his fingers were bruised, not broken, but would need a few days to heal. "He's a tough kid," she said, ruffling his hair. Ethan managed a small smile, but when I asked how he felt, he mumbled, "Fine," and looked away. It gutted me. On the drive home, I tried to lighten the mood, blasting his favorite Imagine Dragons song, but he just stared out the window, his bandaged hand in his lap. That night, I scrolled through the family group chat, where cousins and aunts had already moved on, posting memes about summer and photos of the reunion's dessert table. No one mentioned Ethan. I typed out a message to Tara, then deleted it. What could she say to fix this? Instead, I called her. She answered on the third ring, her voice breezy, like nothing had happened. Yo, what's up, Matt? Tara, what you did to Ethan wasn't funny, I said, keeping my voice even. It was cruel. She scoffed, the sound grating through the phone. Oh, come on, Matt. It was an accident. Kids get hurt. He's fine, right? He's not fine, I snapped, my grip tightening on the phone. And Dad calling him useless? What the hell was that? That's just Dad, she said, like it excused everything. You know how he is. Why are you making this a thing? I hung up, my hands shaking. It wasn't just the incident. It was the patterns we'd all accepted, Dad's harshness, Tara's recklessness, my silence. I'd let it slide for years, thinking it was just how families were. But Ethan deserved better, and I was starting to see that I did too. The next few days were a blur of work and worry. My cubicle at the accounting firm felt like a cage, spreadsheets blurring as my mind replayed Ethan's scream, Tara's smirk, Dad's laugh. I couldn't focus, my coffee growing cold as I stared at numbers that meant nothing. Why did this hit so hard? I started digging into the roots of it, the years of family dynamics I'd buried under the label of normal. Dad was a retired Marine and high school football coach, a man who filled every room with his presence. He'd raised Tara and me to be tough, to never show weakness. Useless was his weapon of choice, a word he wielded like a whip to keep us in line. I remembered a time when I was 15, trying out for the varsity football team to impress him. I'd fumbled a pass, and he'd yelled from the stands, useless. The other players laughed, and I'd burned with shame, running extra laps to prove him wrong. Tara, though, thrived on his attention, even the negative kind. She'd pull pranks, hot sauce in his coffee, hiding his car keys, anything to make him laugh or yell. It was her way of proving she wasn't invisible. Tara's life was messier than mine. She dropped out of Ohio State, bounced between bartending jobs, and dated guys who were trouble, guys with motorcycles and rap sheets. Her pranks were her shield, her way of staying in control, but this time, she'd gone too far. Ethan wasn't a peer she could tease, he was a kid, trusting and vulnerable. I thought about a prank she'd pulled on me at 12, locking me in the shed for an hour during a family barbecue. I'd laughed it off then, but it hurt, and I'd never told her. Maybe that's why I'd stayed silent for so long. I took Ethan to the pediatrician again for a follow-up. He was quieter than usual, his chatter about superheroes replaced by one-word answers. When I asked if he was scared of Tara, he nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. She's mean, he whispered. It was a gut punch. I realized this wasn't just about one incident, it was about the family culture I'd let him walk into. I called Tara again, meeting her at a diner near her apartment in Short North. The place smelled of fries and coffee, and Tara slid into the booth, her leather jacket creaking. Okay, Matt, what's this about? She asked, popping a fry in her mouth. You hurt Ethan, I said, my voice steady. And you need to make it right? She rolled her eyes, leaning back. He'll get over it. Kids are resilient. Maybe, I said, but you don't get to decide that. And you need to stop using pranks to hurt people. Her smirk faded, and for a moment, I saw something like guilt flicker in her eyes. I didn't mean to, she muttered. It just got out of hand. She promised to talk to Ethan, but I wasn't sure she'd follow through. As I drove home, I realized this wasn't just about Tara or Dad, it was about me, too. I'd let their behavior slide for too long, and it had cost Ethan. I had to break the cycle, but where to start? Lauren came home from Chicago, and we stayed up late, dissecting the family mess over glasses of Merlot on our sagging couch. The apartment was quiet, Ethan asleep down the hall. You can't change them, Lauren said, her dark eyes steady, but you can show Ethan what strength looks like. Be the dad you wish you'd had. She was right. I decided to start with Dad. I drove to his house on a Saturday, leaving Ethan with Lauren. The Worthington house smelled of motor oil and grass clippings, and Dad was in the garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower, his hands greasy. Hey, kid, he said, grinning through his graying beard. What's up? Dad, we need to talk about the reunion, I said, my voice firm. What you said about Ethan, calling him useless. It wasn't okay. His grin vanished, replaced by a scowl. It was a joke, Matt. You're too soft on that boy. Kids need to toughen up. You did. I didn't toughen up, I said, my voice rising. I spent my life trying to prove I wasn't useless to you. I won't let Ethan grow up feeling like that. Dad set down his wrench, his jaw tight. You turned out fine, didn't you? Good job, nice house, family. What's the problem? The problem is you don't see it, I said. Your words hurt. They hurt me, and now they're hurting Ethan. It stops here. He didn't apologize, he never did, but he nodded, his eyes distant, like he was chewing on something bitter. It wasn't much, but it was a crack in his armor. Next, I tackled Tara. I met her at a coffee shop in German Village, the kind with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. She was late, as usual, her boots clomping as she slid into the chair across from me. What now, Matt? She asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. You need to apologize to Ethan, I said. And mean it. No more pranks that hurt people. She sighed, picking at her chipped nail polish. I didn't think it'd be a big deal. Dad always laughed at stuff like that. That's the problem, I said. It's not funny when it hurts someone. Ethan's scared of you now. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked shaken. I'll talk to him, she said quietly. I didn't mean to, scare him. I hope she meant it, but I wasn't holding my breath. That weekend, I took Ethan to his Little League game, watching him swing at pitches with a focus that made me proud. As he ran the bases, I realized strength wasn't about being tough like Dad thought, it was about protecting the people you love, even when it's hard. Ethan's hand healed, the bruises fading, but his silence lingered. One evening, I found him at the kitchen table, drawing our family, Lauren, me, him, no Tara. His crayon scratched the paper, and I sat beside him, heart heavy. Buddy, I said, I'm so sorry about the reunion. Aunt Tara made a mistake, and Grandpa said something mean. But you are not useless. You're smart, kind, the best kid I know. He looked up, eyes wide. Why did Grandpa say that? I took a deep breath. Sometimes people say hurtful things because that's what they learned growing up. But it's not okay, and I'm making sure it won't happen again. He nodded, adding a small figure that looked like Tara to his drawing. It was a flicker of trust, fragile but real. I hugged him, his curls tickling my chin, and promised myself I'd protect that trust. Over the next week, I watched Ethan closely. He'd always been a chatterbox, telling stories about superheroes or his latest school project, but now he was quieter, his laughter rare. At breakfast, he pushed his cereal around, and when I asked about school, he shrugged. It's okay, he said, but his eyes said otherwise. I started spending more time with him, playing catch in the apartment complex's parking lot, reading Captain Underpants at bedtime, trying to pull him out of his shell. One night, he asked, is Aunt Tara mad at me? No, buddy, I said, my throat tight. She made a bad choice, but she loves you. She's going to make it right? I wasn't sure she would, though. Tara had texted me a few times, vague promises to talk to Ethan soon, but nothing concrete. Lauren and I talked about it over dinner, the apartment smelling of her homemade lasagna. Give her time, Lauren said, slicing into the dish. She's got her own stuff to work through, but she'll come around. Focus on Ethan. I nodded, but the waiting was hard. I took Ethan to his Little League practice, watching him field grounders with a focus that made me proud. His coach, a burly guy named Mike, clapped him on the shoulder. Good hustle, Carter. Ethan smiled, a real one, and I felt a spark of hope. But when we got home, he drew another picture, this one of Spider-Man fighting a monster labeled Mean Words. I taped it to the fridge, my heart aching. A week later, Tara showed up unannounced, a baseball glove wrapped in a red bow in her hands. Her leather jacket was gone, replaced by a Reds hoodie, and her usual swagger was muted. Hey, Ethan, she said, kneeling to his level. I'm really sorry about the car door. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to be funny, but it wasn't. Can we start over? Ethan hesitated, his eyes flicking to me, then back to her. He took the glove, his fingers tracing the leather, and nodded. Okay, he said softly. They went to the parking lot, tossing a baseball back and forth. Tara was patient, teaching him how to catch without flinching, her laughter lighter than I'd heard in years. I watched from the window, Lauren beside me. She's trying, Lauren said. That's something. It was. But I knew healing wasn't just about one apology. I started setting boundaries, telling Tara no more pranks, period. She rolled her eyes but agreed. I also talked to Ethan about standing up for himself. If anyone makes you feel bad, I said, you tell me or Mom, okay? You're worth more than that. A month later, we hosted a family dinner at our apartment. Dad came, his usual gruffness softened as he asked Ethan about his drawings. When Ethan spilled his juice, Dad just handed him a napkin, no useless, in sight. Tara joined us, bringing a homemade apple pie, her first attempt at baking, she admitted with a laugh. It was burnt, but Ethan ate 2 slices, grinning. The air felt different, not perfect, but warmer. I realized I was seeing my family for what it was, flawed, human, capable of hurting but also healing. I couldn't erase the past, but I could build a better future for Ethan. The next July, the Carter family reunion rolled back into Worthington, the backyard alive with the same chaos, kids screaming through the sprinkler, burgers sizzling, Springsteen on repeat. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange, and the air smelled of charcoal and cut grass. Ethan, now 7, chased his cousins, his laughter bright as he waved his worn Spider-Man figure. His fingers had healed, no trace of the bruises, and his grin was back, full force. I sat at the picnic table, Lauren beside me, her hand in mine. She'd been my rock, her quiet strength pulling us through the past year. The year hadn't been easy. After Tara's apology, Ethan had warmed to her slowly, their baseball games becoming a weekly ritual. She'd started a job at a local brewery, her first steady gig in years, and there was a lightness to her I hadn't seen since we were kids. She'd stopped most of her pranks, though she couldn't resist swapping my root beer for ginger ale at the reunion, a harmless jab that made Ethan giggle. I let it slide, grateful for the change in her. Dad was slower to shift. He'd never apologized for the useless comment, but he'd stopped using the word. At Ethan's birthday party in March, he'd brought a model rocket kit, spending an hour helping Ethan build it. When it launched, soaring over the park, Dad's grin matched Ethan's. It wasn't a full reckoning, but it was progress. At the reunion, Tara tossed a frisbee with Ethan, her teasing playful now, not sharp. "You're getting good, kid," she called as he caught a tricky throw. Ethan beamed, running to show her his new comic book, one he'd drawn himself. I watched, my chest tight with pride. Lauren squeezed my hand. "You did this," she whispered. "You showed him he's enough." When Ethan tripped over a tree root, scraping his knee, Dad didn't laugh. He walked over from the porch, his beer set aside, and helped Ethan up. "You're tougher than you look, kid," he said, ruffling his hair. Ethan grinned, running back to the game. I caught Dad's eye, and he nodded, a silent acknowledgement. Later, as the sun set, we gathered around a bonfire, the kids roasting marshmallows. Tara sat next to Ethan, helping him skewer a marshmallow without burning himself. Dad told a story about his Marine days, his voice softer than I remembered, and Ethan listened, wide-eyed. I looked around, at Lauren laughing with Aunt Linda, at Tara high-fiving Ethan, at Dad passing me a beer, and realized we were healing. Not just Ethan, but all of us. It wasn't perfect. Dad still had his gruff moments, and Tara's ginger ale prank showed her mischievous streak wasn't gone. But the air felt lighter, the shadows of that awful day fading. Ethan's laughter rang out, clear and free, and I knew we'd built something stronger. It was enough.